Okay, guys, so this is Mr. Halton's first attempt at doing a video lesson, so please don't judge him. As always, if I'm going too fast, please feel free to press pause if you need to go back and jot down any notes. Okay, perfect. So let's go ahead and jump right in. Today, we are looking at the Monroe Doctrine, so go ahead and add it to your table of contents, page 73. Go ahead and draw your line. And what that really means is we're going to be covering two separate but equally important topics today. The first one is a look at our fifth president, right? So we'll spend a few minutes looking at his policies, things that he did while in office. And then we're going to spend the bulk of our time looking at one of his major policies, the Monroe Doctrine. So Monroe Doctrine, page 73, add it to your table of contents. Perfect. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and jump right in, and let's sort of talk about our objective here today. So like I said, we're going to be doing two things. We're going to take a look at James Monroe and his presidency, and we're going to do a deep dive of probably his most important policy, right, which is his Monroe Doctrine. After we take a look at that, we're actually going to look at that policy and compare it to Washington's farewell address. So two big things today. All right, so the basics, all right? James Monroe, pardon me. Ooh, he's our fifth president, right? And so he serves 2 terms, tells you a little bit about his popularity. He's extremely popular, gets reelected, a ton of the vote. Like the last 2 presidents, he's a Democratic Republican, and also like the last 2 presidents, he's a Virginian. Okay, so make sure you go ahead and jot this down. James Monroe on the left and the 3 details on the right. Okay, so now let's dive into some of his policies. James Monroe, he was a military man. Before this, he was a general, patriot, fought in the Revolution. And one of his signature policies will be to spend a bunch of money expanding our military, right? And of course, he gets put into office right after the War of 1812, so military is on people's minds. Also during his presidency, there's some Native American attacks coming from Florida, and we'll talk about this a little bit more later on, but I'll give you a preview, right? So Native Americans are attacking us from Florida. We send in the hero from the last war, War of 1812, right? So we send in Andrew Jackson to stop the Native Americans. Andrew Jackson, of course, like we'll learn later on, is a super gangster. He takes part of Florida. Monroe is worried that this is going to cause Spain to be mad at us and want war. So we sort of just throw Spain some money, right? So we sort of take Florida and then low-key give them money later. But those are not the 2 policies I really want us to focus on. The 2 that I think that jump out to us should be somewhat surprising, right? Monroe keeps the national bank, right? He's a Democratic Republican. Why would he keep the national bank? Well, the answer is, even though he's a Democratic Republican and they typically want smaller government, now that the Federalists are gone, they're starting to take some Federalist ideas. And of course, we know earlier, Democratic Republicans, they were very much so against this idea of a protective tariff. But by 1816, they sort of realized that maybe this protective tariff is good for the country. So they are bringing that in. But what we're actually going to do right now is take a quick pause, and I actually want you guys to pause the video at this point, and you're going to spend the time analyzing document 1, right? So we know we're going to sort of talk about the Monroe Doctrine in a few minutes, but before we talk about it, I want you to go ahead and get some time to dive into it, right? So document 1, you have the Monroe Doctrine along with some guiding questions. Go ahead and read through the doctrine. It's not very long. Let's go ahead and hear it directly from Monroe himself. Answer the questions and then come back to the video. So press pause now. Okay, cool. So we're back. You should have taken this opportunity to read through the Monroe Doctrine, answer those guiding questions. What we're going to do now is actually talk about it. And so when you think about what the Monroe Doctrine does, right, like it deals with foreign policy. It is about our relationships with other countries. And our foreign policy under Monroe, it undergoes a massive change, right? Like when we were with Washington, our country was weaker. We didn't have much money. And Washington warned us, right? Stay away from permanent alliances. Make sure you're just trading. Stay neutral and stay out of other countries' business. He sort of does this because he doesn't want the United States getting involved in any issues with foreign countries, and he wants to make sure we're able to get our money up. Okay? Monroe, though, as our fifth president, inherits a country that's in a much different position, and he's not afraid of Europe. We're essentially telling Europe no more colonies, no more expansion in the Western Hemisphere. Now, the reason he's able to do this is essentially because the United States has a much stronger military. We don't owe so much money, right? So economically and financially, we're doing better. And sort of the deal here is, at least according to Monroe, is let Europeans focus on the Eastern Hemisphere, right? Europe, Africa, Asia. But like the United States is strong enough now, we're going to go ahead and watch out for our hemisphere, right? So like our country and our neighbors behind us. So then looking at this little stupid meme up in the corner of the PowerPoint, right? But why? Why would we want to do this? I mean, it's all about money, power, respect, right? The United States is in a different position. And we're essentially saying, Europe, it's our time to shine, right? Like, this is our backyard. We want to be the top dog in the Western Hemisphere. Okay? So, like, now let's talk about sort of what this means. Our foreign policy is a lot different, right? Like, we want to be known differently around the world now. And the idea here being that we're not as afraid of Europe anymore. You know, we've built a country at least somewhat, right? We know that we didn't do it perfectly, but we've built a country built on freedom. And there are European colonies here in South America who are starting to want freedom too. And the United States is thinking to itself, we want those countries to be free too, right? Like, I mean, if Mexico becomes free, Venezuela becomes free, Colombia becomes free, Brazil becomes free, all of those countries are countries that we are able to trade with now. And so the United States is definitely looking at this as, if we can support our neighbors, get rid of Europe, like we can be the major country in the region. Okay. But why? But why, but why, but why? Like I said, this is an issue of money, power, and respect. The United States is a stronger country financially and militarily. We are tired of European countries being in our hemisphere. If they've got colonies already, they can keep them, but we don't want them expanding anymore, right? I mean, I think it's pretty clear. We want to expand in those areas. We want those new colonies and essentially new countries, right, to be our friends. We want them to look to us to leadership. And this is Monroe essentially saying the United States is not a little punk anymore. Not only are we willing to defend ourselves against European invaders or European aggressors rather, but we're like absolutely committed to fighting if Europe even threatens our neighbors, right? So it's not just about like protecting ourselves from the bully, but it's also about protecting the people around us. Okay, and so our last slide today, what are the comparisons between this document as well as Washington's farewell address? Both focus on foreign policy, right? Like, we're looking at how Washington told us we should work with other countries, as well as what Monroe said about working with other countries. However, this advice was given at two different times, right? Like, it's Washington, it's 1796, America's broke, we're pretty weak, we don't want to fight anybody. France scares us, England scares us, we don't want any problems, right? Like, Washington's very clear. Focus on America. Don't make any political parties and get in arguments. Stay neutral. Don't make permanent friends because then they drag you into war, right? Like all these things, essentially saying, America, get your money up. Focus on you, right? It's very inward focused, right? Inward facing. Monroe is our 5th president, right? Like he's coming in after the War of 1812, which, yeah, we didn't beat England, but we definitely showed them that we can hang with them, right? Like we faced them head on by ourselves and we held our own. And so America's in a stronger position. And so Monroe is very clear. He's like, look, man, Europe, your time is over here, right? If you got some land and some stuff over here, you can keep it, but you're not about to get any more. Like America is going to shine, and like not only are we protecting ourselves, but we're protecting all the other neighbors in this hemisphere, right? It's just like protect America, protect our friends. A kid told me this last year, and I thought it was so powerful. One of my kids, he goes, yo, Mr. Houghton, so like the farewell address, Washington's giving us advice to like what we need to do to be a stronger country, like so like leave everybody alone for right now, stay focused on the trade, making the money, being strong. And then like because Washington told us to do that, Monroe gets a country that's stronger. So like now Monroe can tell the rest of the world, back off, and by the way, you ain't messing with us and you're not messing with our whole squad, all these other areas, territories in the Western Hemisphere. Okay, so it's an issue of power. We're talking about foreign policy, very important. Okay. All right, so now we sort of get to the end of our lesson here. What we're about to do next, one of two things, right? So like if you're watching this video to just review, like you can go ahead and move forward. If not, we're going to be doing this sort of as a class, taking a look at some different political cartoons and like what they mean. So like I'll go ahead and sort of talk about these for a second. Go ahead and take 2 minutes, write down every single thing you think of when you look at this image. You can go ahead and press pause with the video. Okay, so we're back. So I'll kind of talk through this image. When I look at this image, I'm seeing like the world split in half, right? So we have the Western Hemisphere sort of here shaded, and we have the Eastern Hemisphere. Europe is in the Eastern Hemisphere. Monroe is essentially saying, look, Europe, you can focus on the Eastern part, leave the Western Hemisphere to us. All right, our second political cartoon. Once again, go ahead and take 2 minutes, take a look at this political cartoon, write down everything that you're thinking of, and you can go ahead and press pause right now. Okay, once again, I think like it's pretty clear. Monroe here, we see like Uncle Sam, U.S., Uncle Sam, and he's pointing to the Monroe Doctrine. He's telling these European countries, no more. You're not going to mess with our hemisphere anymore. Stay out. And if you look, like one of the European leaders, he's like dressed for war. It looks like he's about to like take over a territory. The other European leader, he's like fat and rich, right? Like he looks like he has a lot of money. This is a guy who's a colonizer, right? Like he's coming to the Americas to take those raw materials back, right? And Monroe is saying no more to this. No more of this like essentially like pimping, right? You're not going to come over here and just take our stuff anymore. All right. Our last political cartoon. Go ahead and take another 2 minutes, jot down everything you're thinking of when you see this political cartoon. You can go ahead and press pause. Okay, so we're back. I think this one is pretty generic. This was actually on the STAR test a couple years ago, I believe. And we see Monroe, he's saying the same thing, right? And if you notice, though, he's not just protecting North America and the U.S., he's protecting the entire Western Hemisphere, right? So that's North and South America. And look who he's telling is off limits to, right? He's like, Europe, no more. And like what I like about this cartoon, Europe and the European leaders, look, they got a bag. They're clearly bringing stuff over here. They're clearly bringing their religion, their warfare. They're bringing their stuff. They're planning to take things back. And Monroe is saying no more. No more, no more, no more. The Western Hemisphere is now off limits. And if you continue to push in, like, we will go to war. Okay, perfect. So now let's go ahead and jump into our practice. What you guys are going to do, you've already analyzed document 1. Go ahead and analyze documents 2 and 3. Paste them onto page 74, or just essentially like right behind today's notes. Once you've done that, go ahead and grab your exit ticket either from Mr. Houghton, or if you're watching this at home, like the exit ticket's on the website already. But grab the exit ticket, go ahead and complete it. And once you're done with your exit ticket, you can go ahead and grab a study guide as well. Our exam is on Thursday, but you can have your study guide from now, so you can go ahead and practice. And tonight's life work, I think it's really 2 things, right? So the first thing is make sure you have your free rice account up and running and just sort of like know your estimate of how many rice grains. So like that's what you're going to write down tomorrow in the tracker, right? Your username and the amount of grains you already have. And we're going to sort of track this month by month. And then the last piece, like you have your study guide, go ahead and start your study guide. All right, guys, this video is going up on YouTube. Don't judge me.